and welcome back to another fantastic episode of Adventures in DevOps. This is our first show. We are recording in the new year, the new decade. Everything's fresh and new, and it is fantastic to be here. I am calling in from surprisingly snowy Seattle, Washington. This is unusual, and yes, everyone does panic when it happens, but so far things have been fairly calm around me, at least. And with me, as always, is my co-host, Chuck. How you doing today?
Doing all right. I'm in Utah, and it's not snowy, which is also unusual.
Wow.
So, yeah, you can see the grass. So, but anyway, things are great here. Just doing a whole bunch of work on the podcast network, and exciting stuff. And I'm excited to talk to our guests. So, today's podcast is sponsored by UpCloud. Is your website running slow? Supercharge your hosting performance by deploying on the world's fastest cloud infrastructure. UpCloud offers superior cloud servers and advanced scalability, instant backup snapshots, and easy-to-use control panel. Fully featured API and a ton of integration options and managing partners. Pricing starts at only $5 a month with enough performance options to host any website or app, all backed by 24/7 live in-house support. You can get started today with a free trial using promo code DevChatTV at upcloud.com/signup. They'll give you a $25 credit to get you going. Remember, upcloud.com/signup with promo code DevChatTV.
Yep, we've got a repeat guest. We're very glad to have him back. We've got Bob Quillin. Did I say that right?
Yeah,
Bob
you got
Quillin from Oracle. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, well, good to be here. Happy 2020. I'm here in beautiful, kind of foggy Austin, kind of weird, foggy weather here, but so, no matter where you are, it's going to be a little different. But yeah, I'm the vice president of Oracle Cloud Developer Relations. So really focus on developer advocacy on the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure side. We've been with Oracle about 4 years, came from the Stack Engine acquisition. So we were a container management solution based in Austin. I've done a lot of work, obviously, with containers and up through Kubernetes, functions, serverless, and basically the whole cloud native kind of stack, and being part of the developer outreach that's helping the developer community take on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, particularly in the cloud native space. So
awesome. People often refer to Seattle as the cloudy city because we've got Amazon, we've got Microsoft, we've got part of Google Cloud up here, but it sounds like Austin might be a cloudy city as well.
Yeah, we're a little cloudy. Interestingly enough, most of the Oracle Cloud Infrastructure team is in Seattle, so we have our operation up there too. So yes, so check that one off the list too. So
nice. Yeah, I was reached out to by your PR team. I had a media admission to KubeCon, and then I wound up not being able to go. And so they were like, "Well, let's just do a remote call," and you made some announcements, and there were some other things that we were going to talk about at the conference. So do you want to just kind of give us a rundown on what's going on and what's new at Oracle Cloud? Because that's kind of where we're at, and then we'll see where we end up with this thing. But
we've been doing the KubeCon, the cloud native CNCF work for several years now, and several KubeCons in. I think I've done 4 or 5 now, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's pretty amazing watching the growth of the community, the ecosystem, and kind of all the people coming into it, trying to learn about it, a much broader, bigger umbrella, which I think is nice to see. Many more of the folks that are coming into cloud native trying to learn about it from the bottom up, but also a lot of advanced stuff going on. We focused on basically 3 different areas at KubeCon in terms of announcements and where we're making progress. We already have our Oracle Kubernetes engine. So Kubernetes is our foundation. We've launched our serverless platform called Functions, and a range of components that support all those pieces. We announced our Oracle API Gateway, which is a new service really focused around integration, trying to pull together a lot of the components that are coming up as people are building out APIs to their SaaS services, their on-prem legacy services. Everything has a REST API. And managing those APIs and doing all that integration work is a particular part of building out software infrastructure today. Everything's got an interface. Everything needs to be glued together. And with microservices, it gets even more complicated. So managing that is really where our API gateway comes in. Second thing we announced is around our new event services around streaming. So we have a Kafka component now and a Kafka extension to our streaming service, which allows now Kafka services to be used. Kafka being the Apache standard, and with the explosion of all that data coming in, financial services, IoT, smart devices, building on top of the Kafka standards, and allowing people to bring in their Kafka pieces allows it to not only bring in streaming data and streaming applications, but connect that into all the other things we're doing on the cloud native side too. So that was a big piece of what we announced. And then the third area was on DevOps tooling, and we've had a lot of DevOps announcements over the last couple of years around the observability of cloud native services, and we announced our new logging service that came out in the fall, or Oracle logging service. It's built on the Fluent D standard, which is a CNCF cloud native standard. So once again, trying to follow the standards. So if you have a Fluent D connector, you can just plug that right into our logging service, and all the other OCI services pull into that. We already have monitoring connections to things like Prometheus. We have event services, which use the cloud event standard also. So all those pieces tend to basically provide this huge toolbox for developers that are putting together cloud native microservice-based architectures, and really building up the whole stack that supports where developers and developer teams are going. So those are the three major areas we announced at the show, and kind of shows where we're focusing on integration, around streaming, around building out DevOps tooling. So
awesome. Well, for the DevOps tooling, I know the API gateway is part of that. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, what we're finding is that when the REST APIs and managing those becomes more and more complicated as the explosion of APIs happen across all your services. Oracle has a huge SaaS business that you can imagine. We have our HCM, we have Marketing Cloud, we have Service Clouds, we've got ERP. So we have a very large business around SaaS within Oracle itself. SaaS runs on top of Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. So what we're finding is a lot of the enterprise customers have the need to connect their existing applications, their SaaS applications, into these cloud native services. So they all have REST APIs. They want to get access to that information. As we've launched our serverless functions product, that has open APIs, and you want to have a function call in and out of those services to call a function as an event happens. We talked a little about events and streaming, so all that kind of pulls together. Another interesting component is, you can imagine, Oracle has a large on-prem application business with its current set of customers, and a lot of those folks have VPN connections and virtual connections into the cloud itself, or hybrid models. And so those have APIs too, and this API gateway allows you to manage into the legacy side too. So you go SaaS down, legacy up, then connect all through components like Kubernetes, serverless, even into database applications too. So really, it is a glue component that it kind of sits in the middle of everything we've been working on, and provides a common area to manage APIs, to see the APIs, to set security standards across all those. And managing APIs across a very large team becomes very complicated, and that kind of really addresses that issue in particular.
Gotcha. So with your Oracle logging service, can you get I'm just looking at the press release, and it talks about it being a single pane of glass for all of your logs. Can you get logs for both on-prem and cloud services in the same place?
Yeah. So as long as you're connected in, we have a VPN Connect, Fast Connect service that basically makes the on-prem side feel like the rest of the cloud. And that's so those logs can move up, and it kind of provides that one single pane of glass, one visual representation. Observability being such a key part of troubleshooting and understanding what's going on, especially as the fast-moving side of cloud native, so many microservices, so many functions, containers, et cetera. So be able to look at all those components along with your classic services too, like you mentioned, the legacy side, and have one place to bring that together. It's been a theme. I think I've seen developers talk a lot about building observability into their as a first-class citizen, and that's something that we really try to promote. And using the Fluent D standard, so you have a Fluent D connector, you can bring that from your on-prem side or other clouds itself. So it's a way to actually, extend, logging to, another level of standardization. So you're not just doing, one-off integrations for everyone else's log. You start using now standard ways to approach it and provide those logs to other services, or use our service as a way kind of as your one-stop shop for that. So.
Got it. Cool. So what kind of problems are you seeing people solve, or do you expect people to solve with this new selection of services and this hybrid cloud model?
Yeah, I think we're seeing some real interesting stuff. We've been focusing a lot trying to help enterprise customers who have legacy applications. So, folks who've been using Java and WebLogic, trying to find ways to bring them on board into the cloud. So we built, a good example is we have a Kubernetes operator for WebLogic. So the WebLogic operator for Kubernetes. And so for using Java and enterprise Java, Java EE, they can actually now put an operator on top of that and manage those WebLogic servers as within a Kubernetes context. So the operator pattern is something that we're seeing people pick up on to kind of give them a way to leapfrog and or an on-ramp almost into the cloud itself. A lot of folks who are using Java are using some of the new components. We have a platform called Helidon. It's an open source project, Helidon, HELIDON.io. It's an open source project, and it's a whole framework for microservices that Java programmers can use to bring in Java into the microservice world. It's cloud ready. So we're seeing folks who are, coming from that part of the world. And we've, the other, as you can imagine, database is a huge part of the Oracle business, kind of where we've, one of our claims to fame, or our big claim to fame. And we've launched a whole set of autonomous database services over this last year and a half. Autonomous transaction processing, autonomous data warehouse. So it's almost like for developers with 1 or 2 clicks, you have a database up and running. It's a very simple way to build a database and get it up and running. It's part of our developer free tier too. So you can get a free database in a very simple way. What that allows you to do is hook that into a container-based application. So we have a OCI, or Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Broker for Kubernetes, which allows you to connect the database applications into your container world and persist that database connection as you're building these ephemeral applications that are coming up and down on the container side, which has always been an issue. So you got this persistent connection on the database side. So now you have this really nice pattern where you have autonomous database on one side, container-based application on the other side, and a service broker in the middle. It's able to negotiate and keep those connections open. So that's another thing we're seeing, is that there's a lot of people trying to just work through all those complex issues. It's like, I got WebLogic, I got database, I got Java. I'm going to, building something new is, I won't say it's easy, but it's cleaner. But a lot of the clean stuff has been done. So now people are working on kind of the messy next steps, and taking, the more mission critical applications, the things that are harder to work on, things that have been around a little while, and try to move those over incrementally. Not just lift and shift them onto the cloud, but, move and improve. A lot of people talk about, or then move it, but also adopt all those cloud native infrastructure patterns and benefits. So if you move to the cloud, you want to use all the cloud services that are available to you. And luckily, with managed services, that's getting easier and easier to do. So.
Got it. Well, let's say I'm a developer at a startup or a medium-sized business. What would make me choose Oracle Cloud over the other clouds that are out there?
Yeah. What's fun for us as we go out and talk to developers and at conferences and meetups, et cetera, is that we have we call it Generation 2 cloud. So it's a cloud that offers, not only virtual machines, but bare metal infrastructure. It's been built by many of the folks that built the original AWS and Azure infrastructure, and they came over to build this next gen infrastructure at Oracle Cloud. So it's the newest of the hyperscale clouds that are out there. So it's highly secure, high performant, and the pricing and cost is at or below what you would get with AWS. So we know where the price is. Everyone knows what that is. We also assume that people are using multi-cloud environments too. So, we expect people to be able to either coming from AWS or they can integrate with Azure, they can bring VMware in. So there's a lot of integrations that are kind of enterprise aware and enterprise ready, but it's very simple to use. It's quick, it's high performant. There's a whole free developer tier that's always free. And what that allows you to do is run, compute instances, get some storage, get a database up and running, and actually try this out and get it running very quickly. And all the open source projects are there too. We've been, one of the early members of the CNCF. We're platinum members. Our Kubernetes service has been around over almost 3 years now. So we have a very kind of stable platform and a tool set that developers can access very easily. It should be very familiar to them. If they're using it on-prem, they're using it on a laptop, they can bring those container-based applications. They could use open source applications. And it's a light bulb that goes off in a lot of people's minds when they kind of see it all. They're like, I didn't expect that to find that from Oracle itself, or Oracle Cloud, that the openness, the ability to work with other clouds, the low price, and you bring your own license, a variety of different ways that are really open and easy for developers to get access to. So it takes a little bit of navigating through people's perceptions and kind of what they're bringing into the, from history of thinking of where Oracle was, but really where Oracle is with this Gen 2 cloud, with the high performance infrastructure, with the pricing, and these new cloud native application infrastructures that can be built on top of it. It's something that people should try out, evaluate for themselves, and it makes it easy to move from application from cloud to cloud too. I mean, we expect people to be using multiple clouds. We have interconnects with Azure, so people are using Azure interconnects there. We have certifications with VMware, so if you have stuff on-prem, you can move that into our environment too. So I think it's really come a long way, and it's interesting to see that aha moment when people say, I should give this a try, and they go off and they try some stuff and it really does work. So.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, some of the things that you're talking about here with just the performance and the security and the what it costs. A lot of people are looking for those things, but at the same time, I also see that some of that's kind of hard to prove out, right? So yes. I actually have to come in and try it and say, okay, this really is, I'm better off here than I was over, at one of the other clouds. The other thing is that my experience with the clouds is Azure's a different kind of really hard from AWS, is a different kind of really hard from Google Cloud, which is a different kind of really hard. And so I'm curious, and Nell brought up the API gateway as a possibility, just looking at that, or looking at the, maybe some of the UIs that I'm going to use to get started or get things running. What kinds of things do you do to kind of lower the barrier to entry for people that aren't super familiar with what you offer? Because it seems like you kind of have to be an expert in GCP or AWS or Azure in order to make them really do what you need them to do. And I'm wondering if Oracle's the same way, or if you have some other measure to make that easier.
Yeah, I mean, clearly we're coming into it with an understanding that folks have a perceived way of working and have worked in maybe another cloud before. So we try to follow patterns that are familiar. We also support, all the components you would expect to find up in any cloud, from, object storage to block storage to compute, shapes to all the cloud native services too. And one place I always tell people to start is start with something that you're familiar with, and try something like Kubernetes. Try something that if you are familiar with that, and you're using something up in, what we found, we talked to a lot of startups, and startups can be easier to work with sometimes, where they're like, I'll try that, and they move, and we've had people move over from like Azure or AWS over to our Kubernetes infrastructure in like 10 minutes, because it's a very simple and kind of standard way to move and support infrastructure that's conformant. And that's kind of the promise that we're getting to. We want to try to get away from the single cloud lock-in. So part of it is, trying things that should be portable, and don't go into the depths of trying to do some really, really hard stuff to start with. Get comfortable with the infrastructure itself, get comfortable with the way it works.
Gremlin is a chaos engineering service built by engineers from companies like Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Dropbox. To learn more about chaos engineering, join the Slack community over at gremlin.com/Slack. With thousands of active members, it's a great place to network and find resources to improve your organization's resilience.
Try things and if it doesn't work the way you expect it to work, let us know, and that's something that we're all trying to fix. But I think what people find with AWS in particular, and they eventually found Google too, is that to get things to really work, you have to become an expert in that cloud, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the spirit of the cloud too. It's supposed to be open, it's supposed to be multi-cloud. We actually allow people to talk about multi-cloud, unlike some of the competitors out there, and so I think that's the model, and I think over time this will play out. I think we're at a moment in time where people, where they've started is where they are, but as they try to do a broader set of applications and are moving, and enterprises are making this move, they'll be looking for a variety of items that need to be checked off their list before they make those moves. And I think that's where some of the work that we've done in security around performance, around geographical scale, high availability will come into play too, because you're not just building a hobby shop application, you're building something you want to run in production. So.
Right. I tell people the story, and I think our listeners have heard the story, but I'll tell it again briefly. A few years ago, I was working on an application for a very high-profile political campaign, and we had a cloud service go down on election day. At least it was a little complicated. So it appeared to go down. It turned out there were weird error rates going on in it. And since then, I've always decided if it's that high-profile an application or that date critical, because you don't redo election day. You really can't delay it, or at least it's very rare. I am always going to have a multi-cloud setup system ready to go so I can easily fail over if needed.
Yeah. I think, having that diversity, and one of the exciting things at KubeCon, I was part of the multi-cloud con pre-day conference, and I think multi-cloud has really begun to work its way into not just a wish item, but something that it becomes a must-have for provide these type of applications for that purpose that you talked about in particular. And it's a reality that people have multiple clouds already. They're probably running, maybe Oracle ERP, they're running Salesforce on the SaaS side, maybe they got some AWS going on, maybe they're running their database up in Oracle Cloud, who knows? But people are going to start, like they have multiple application vendors today, Microsoft doing this, Oracle doing that, Google doing that. They'll have multiple cloud vendors, and by nature, they'll want those to work together. There's standards that are working their way through that. We're doing some certifications and sort of shared support, shared sign-on kind of with different cloud vendors, and Azure being one of the first ones we work with, that allows all these things to happen in a very supported way. Common support, common sign-on, certified applications, partners that can help you on both sides. Doing the same thing with the VMware itself too. So those kind of pairwise integrations help, along with the broader standardizations happening with things like Kubernetes, which allow you to actually have a model that is designed for multi-cloud. It's kind of a complex thing to do right now, but it's getting closer to reality, I think so.
Right. And going back a little bit to Kubernetes, you were talking about people, trying something out. And it makes me think, this was also maybe 4 years ago or something. I was trying Kubernetes for the first time. I mean, Minikube worked all right, but then I decided to stand up my own Kubernetes cluster to try it. I'm really stubborn, so I hung on and I got some help until it worked, but I would have much rather had a managed Kubernetes service to try out Kubernetes for at least the first few times, I think. Yeah.
And I think that's what we found too. Is I remember going to some of the original KubeCons and DockerCons, and it was always like people who basically they showed how they stood their own. They kind of were celebrated, and they got the trophies on top of their mantle for actually being able to run Kubernetes themselves. But you talk to them, a year or 2, 3 years later after doing that, And they're one of the first ones to say you should use a managed service because,
right.
Basically we had to hire Kubernetes experts. We became experts at keeping up to date with all the releases, trying to build a high availability model across zones, et cetera, and availability domains is very difficult. So all those things a cloud provider provides for you. And as I talked to folks who were like, what about serverless? And I said, well, serverless is the same way. Now there's managed serverless services, and everyone has one, and just like everyone has a Kubernetes service. And you'll start, the more and more cloud providers can provide those managed services, it'll help people, I think, adopt things much more quickly. I always kind of call it either a cheat or it's a way to leapfrog all that learning curve. Eventually, you may want to run some stuff yourself once you're comfortable with it. It's up to you. And some people have very specific security needs and applications that they have to run themselves, either in a geo or in federal or something like that. But in most cases, people are pushing towards these standards, and the cloud providers can provide those for you. And then it becomes a question of, if everyone has the same Kubernetes-based service, you can begin to make selections on the basis of, if I've got a geographical need where the data has to be in country, so I'm going to pick something that way, or maybe it has to be HIPAA compliant. I got to have that. Maybe it has to be the cheapest thing, and I'm going to pick the cheapest service out there because it's very disposable. And I'm bringing things up and down. I want to use something that's very expendable. So, but you should be able to make that decision based upon price, based upon business needs, based upon compliance, et cetera. And I think we're getting that with Kubernetes, and more of the services are like that, where the only choice was AWS, honestly, before. And that was probably 2 or 3 years ago. I think people now are seeing that I can make a choice, and maybe I can have multiple vendors for different purposes. And maybe I start here and I move it there, or I have two things running and they work together. All those patterns are possible now, and that's exciting, because now we're not just in a single cloud world; we're in a multi-cloud world. So,
yeah, it seems. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Chuck.
It's interesting to me that we're making this point too, because I want to understand how Kubernetes works, but I'm typically working on some side project, right? So my main business is running podcasts and, finding sponsors and supporting hosts and things like that, right? And, my team is people who help write show notes and edit podcasts and things like that. And so at the end of the day, I don't have time to go figure out how Kubernetes works, right? And so instead, I do want that cloud provider. I want somebody that I can just go to and say, okay, I just have to understand how to get my app onto it.
Yep.
And so that's the game here. And that's why we're playing, I would like to figure out how to do it on, because we talk about this stuff on this show and some of the other shows, how to do it on Oracle and AWS and GCP and all these others. But, at the end of the day, for my own stuff, yeah, I'd like to be able to push it up. The other thing is that in some ways, containerization solves some of the issues that I've had running VPS servers on DigitalOcean or whatever, right? And so, figuring that out too just gets a lot simpler with a lot of these solutions. And then I can kind of level up where I need to. Okay, I need to be able to manage this aspect of the Kubernetes cluster. This cloud lets me do that.
It seems a little counter to the DevOps philosophy to have to give out trophies for getting a technology set up, to be honest.
Yeah.
I want a trophy.
Everyone gets a trophy.
It makes for a good paper and a good conference session. But then 2 years later, you're like, why did I go through all that work when I could just like push a button here and click and follow this guide and I'm up and running? So there's the hard way and the easy way. And you see a lot of people doing blogs on, here's Kubernetes the hard way, here's the easy way. And you can make the choice.
Yeah, I ran a marathon last year, and they give you a medal at the end, right? And it's like you didn't collapse, right? Yeah. And it kind of feels like this, right? If you really just need to get to the to the finish line, you could drive. So.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that just quickly on that subject. I think the one thing I found a lot of discussion going on at KubeCon was around the skills gap, which is, you see, there were a lot of new people. We go into sessions where it'd be like, more than half the people, maybe 2/3, 3/4 are new people coming into KubeCon, which is great. And so while there's this great 201 and 301 advanced content and new services coming in, there's a big need for the 101 content still, and people kind of learning as they go. So there's this huge population of folks who are trying to learn and, from the bottom up as much as they have to. Managed services can actually accelerate that. But if we're not careful, then the more stuff we add on to the top of the stack, the harder it's going to be to get someone to understand all the full stack itself. And I spent a lot of time in service mesh sessions and trying to learn about all the stuff that's going on there, which is very exciting. And get myself kind of, a sense of where the market is there. It kind of reminds me where Kubernetes was maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where there was a smaller group, bigger focus, not still different standards that are coming out. So it's kind of exciting, but it's also, they're kind of in the trophy mode where, look what I did, I got it up and running, Istio or Linkerd. So anyway.
It's interesting to me, listening throughout this episode. So you talked about, embracing hybrid cloud model or multiple vendors model. I think it shows how far Oracle has come. Because 10, 20 years ago, you would choose Oracle or you'd choose IBM or you'd choose Microsoft. The idea of, having multi-vendors was kind of an anti-pattern, but It sounds like.
Well, they went out of their way to lock you in.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's something I've noticed, even just 5 years ago, people would talk about, well, Oracle's going to be left behind. Well, Microsoft is going to be left behind. It's interesting to me that these are 2 case studies, and I'm sure there's others as well, where it shows an organization, even one that big, can change with the times.
Yeah. And I think you may not want to change, and there's, revenue and dollar reasons that may be saying one thing in one year, but then your customers and the market's changing so quickly on the other side that you see that, it becomes very clear that you hear it. If you aren't customer driven, you listen to customers, this is where you end up going. And I think that's one thing that, Oracle does pride itself on. They will listen to their customers, and the customers spoke, and this is where the market was headed, and this is what they needed. So, I think that's, you see Microsoft being very successful in that transition. I think Oracle was going through that too. And what's funny, or what's fun to watch, I think, is folks like AWS and Google are really trying to embrace the enterprise and help the enterprise bring out to the cloud. Not just the new developer, they kind of own that, but it's the enterprises that need to, where the big opportunity is. And that's where Oracle or something like Microsoft is already. So in some ways, this next 3 to 5 to 7 years, that there'll be a clash between AWS and Google coming into the enterprise, and then the enterprise vendors who are building out a very extensive cloud, trying to take their customers up, and we'll see how that works out. But I think that dynamic is where the interaction, where the energy is right now. I think it's fun to watch both those things happen, because you see it happening in real time at conferences, at customer sites, et cetera. So
awesome.
Yeah, I've been to a bunch of the events at Microsoft, and it's always interesting to me. Yeah, how they were kind of the poster child for being closed source, vendor lock-in, all that stuff. And yeah, with Azure, they're like, run whatever you want, however you want. And yeah, it sounds like we're having that same conversation here. And yeah, I think more and more we're going to run into that, where people do want to be able to do that. And in fact, I've actually been seeing a lot of blog posts and conversations happen where people are essentially saying, yeah, this is the AWS flavor of setup, and this is the Azure flavor of setup, and here's the Google flavor of setup, and here's the generic flavor of setup that works on all 3 of them.
Right, yeah.
So that you can move.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you see progress made that's proprietary, and then there's standard progress is happening in things like CNCF and Apache, et cetera. It's helping to bridge that gap. We do a lot of work with HashiCorp and Terraform and automation around that. And we have a Terraform as a service product called Resource Manager as a service, so it's Terraform as a service. And that automation is also, it's kind of a way to connect into other clouds in a very standard way. And there's always a Terraform connector into these different clouds. Now we have a lot of stuff we've done with Terraform on our cloud too. So we're seeing a lot of people using that automation layer from a DevOps perspective in particular to do some integration on a cross-cloud basis. So I think you're seeing that's one area there's a lot of unification happening where I could just use Terraform, and that provides a level of abstraction for me. So, for example, yeah.
I'm a little curious, looking at, you made some announcements at KubeCon, right? And it's like, hey, we saw the cloud going this way, and so we built these services in. One thing that I'm wondering is, what trends are you seeing now that you feel like need to be addressed in the cloud? Not necessarily with Oracle Cloud, but with some of the other, general clouds out there. Because, we've talked about kind of the big 3 or 4, but I mean, IBM has a cloud. It seems like a bunch of other larger companies have clouds, and you've kind of got the mid tiers where, Rackspace will sell you Kubernetes and block storage and things like that, or DigitalOcean, down to just one company that does, we specialize on the serverless stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think we talked about one big trend. I think that's obviously got legs, and people working on that for a while. We talked about multi-cloud, and I think that's an area where there's work to be done, but we're making significant progress over this last year that is encouraging. It's not just a science project; it's actually real, and people can do can make it work in very reliable ways. Another area that I think is super exciting is the sort of the IoT and the smart device edge world, and the explosive nature of that. You take a look at all the devices that are out there and people are pushing Kubernetes out to the edge. People are looking at using serverless and microservices out on the edge. And so to me, that also combines with stuff that's going on with streaming, and obviously with Kafka and things where you've got streaming apps coming in from cars, from scooters, from financial services, all these different kind of data points, et cetera. And all those things are coming in, need to be processed in real time. That area is while there's a huge investment going on right now, I think that's an area that's super exciting, and its connection into cloud native and the work on the back end that's going on, I think is going to be something that goes on for another 5 to 10 years as we build out the whole edge infrastructure and the whole 5G stuff that's going on. So that the smart device IoT explosion of the edge and all the pressure that puts on the cloud itself, extending the cloud out to the edge, that's a big area, I think, of interest and potential. There's a lot of work. I mentioned service mesh too, and I think that's an area where I won't say it's early. It's probably getting into that early maturity phase, but that's allowing application developers to use microservices on top of Kubernetes, on top of containers, layers of abstraction, in very reliable ways, and with patterns that kind of are pre-built, so you can build a microservice application without having to, go through 2 years of training and read 10 books. There's some prescriptive ways to do it. There's still some standardization that needs to be worked out, but I think service mesh is the next level up of application infrastructure and design that's going to help people take advantage of all the work that's been invested in containers and in Kubernetes, and now they can run the application on top of it. So that one I think has a long life ahead of it, and it's exciting to see kind of what you can do with the mesh itself and how microservices can be engineered in very reliable ways using patterns that Lyft and Uber and Netflix that I've used before. These are well-known patterns. They're now established as things like Istio and Linkerd and Envoy. So those 3 areas in particular, I think, are super interesting. Going forward this year and into next, and probably this whole decade.
We've been recording Ruby Rogue since 2011, and we've talked to a lot of people who have had a really deep influence, not only on the programming community, but also on the Ruby community. And as we've talked to these people, it's become apparent to me that we talk a lot about the things that make them interesting that they've done, but we don't really get into how they got into programming or how they came up in their career, how they got to be the person who invented whatever library or technique that they came on the show to talk about. And so I put together a show where we actually highlight these things. We talk to them about how they got into programming. We talk to them about how they got into Ruby. maybe how they got into Rails. We get a little bit deep into what makes them tick and why they are the way they are. And then we talk about what they're working on. We talk about the things that make them well known or make them interesting. And a lot of times it's the stuff that goes beyond the code that really makes these people tick and makes them the kind of people that we want to hear about. And so I put together a show called My Ruby Story. You can find it at myrubystory.com. And it's where I interview these people and just get the stories of these people and how they came into programming. So if you want to hear inspirational stories or get ideas on how you can actually advance your career, then go check it out at myrubystory.com.
What I think we're going to see is there is a plethora, I think I said that right this time, not plethora of Kubernetes related tools out there. We're especially seeing this with Service Mesh. And I noticed that when I was at All Things Open in Raleigh, North Carolina late last year. I think we're going to see more patterns established or more prescriptions for groups of tools that work really well together in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
That's what I foresee coming. A little bit more of, not a little bit more of a little more conventions established, right, rather than rolling your own combination of various tools when you want to use Kubernetes or when you want to use other technologies.
Yeah, there's a lot of DIY required and some assembly required. So I think that's a great point. I think that's finding ways that curated patterns and packages and stacks. That's the next step to make it easier for people. And I think teams need that because it's too hard to assemble yourself right now. So
yeah, that's definitely true. And I love the idea too. Yeah, I need an infrastructure that looks like this. You pick your technology stack at each level, and then and it just makes it. Yeah, absolutely. I'm talking to people, and it's not. What we were talking about before, just the trend toward making it easier, making it more approachable for people in general, right? So, Kubernetes is still scary to people. I talk to developers that, containers are still kind of a foreign idea. And, getting it to the point where, somebody who can come in and feel like, oh, containers isn't so unapproachable or so hard or whatever, all the way up the stack.
Yeah. And I think it's a process that it's going to take some time. There's a lot of resources out there, a lot more than there used to be. And, I always tell folks to start local. There's lots of meetups. I know here in Austin, there's a ton of meetups where people are just learning as they go and they're learning from their peers. Or the brown bags at work. They try to find one at lunches or in the evenings or whatever works for you. And there's lots of people going through the same thing. So, and if you can't pay for a big conference that takes you to Amsterdam, there's ones that are local that can get you started. And there's a lot of free stuff that vendors are providing too. So a lot of it is, putting some work in, but I think it's more approachable now. And there's a lot of free tools out there and that are available on YouTube and a variety of different training services too. So ways to get started on your own.
Yep.
My theory is that we achieved peak containers buzzwordiness, if that's not a word, but let's pretend it is. I'd say 2018. That looking back now, I think that's when it did. And as we saw with the late 2019, the split between Docker sold its enterprise services branch to Mirantis, I think it was. So now it's separate from the rest of their business. I think it's showing that we've achieved coolness when it comes to containers, but now I think people are figuring out how to work with them on a technical level and also how to work with them on a business level. It's great that they're really cool, but what can they do for me? And there's a lot. And I think we're going to see more of those patterns and those stories come out.
Yeah, it's making that transition from cool to practical. And that's kind of a hard transition to make, but I guess you got to be cool first. Then that kind of creates some models, some patterns and get some buzz going. And then the hard work starts. And I think that's kind of what we've seen over the last probably 2 to 3 years. And still it's just in some ways just getting going. And I mentioned, just building those connections to existing tools, providing the training for existing teams, helping people get over these cultural hurdles, these complexity hurdles. It's a lot of work, but I think there's, it's like one block at a time, one piece at a time, and people can build it. So,
Yep, absolutely. So one other thing that I'm a little curious on is, how do you get the word out about Oracle having a cloud? Just in the sense that, when people talk about it generally, they'll
Right.
start out with AWS, and then depending on which ecosystem they live in, then they may wind up talking about Google or Microsoft. And so, Oracle doesn't even, really even get honorable mention unless somebody's really steeped in it, right?
Yeah. So first one approach is more podcasts. So
Yay.
hey, no, but the work that I help promote and try to lead is is doing it organically, getting out to the DevOps days, the meetups, the container Kubernetes cloud meetups all around the country, around the world. Try to get into the organizations that are already using Oracle. We do training and kind of evangelize through there. And so in some ways that's a conversation by conversation, and being out at the major connection points like these conferences. We say KubeCon that's grown from 500 to 12,000 and growing right now, and selling out every place it goes. So it doesn't seem to be an end to that growth. So trying to be there and make those connections one at a time. And then I guess we have to buy a Super Bowl ad next time. Maybe that's the next big thing.
Please do. I want to see what you come up with.
I want to see a Kubernetes or Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I want to see any cloud Super Bowl ad. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I have one more question before we move to picks. And it's not, I wouldn't say this is a heavy question, but it's a medium weight question, which is, a topic that's been very, very frequently discussed recently is the idea that a lot of cloud services are offering services based on open source products, or that serve up open source products. And some people have asked, are those clouds giving back to those open source products? So I'd love if you could tell us about how does open source give back to Kubernetes, or how does Oracle give back to Kubernetes, or how does it give back to other open source technologies that it provides services for?
Yeah, it is a fundamental part of the open source philosophy. It kind of started with, take a look at, we're the stewards of Java and have a strong commitment. It's like 25 years of Java anniversary coming up here. So we kind of start with, where we've come from and seen where it's worked. Java, MySQL, we're huge stewards also within the Linux community, and Oracle Linux has been a big part of Linux Foundation. And we have also, through our labs and through projects, done, particularly since I've been here, some major open source projects. Graal VM, GRAAL VM. Graal VM is a great example. It's an open source project. It's a polyglot virtual machine that can run multiple languages and provide just-in-time compilation or ahead-of-time compilation built for the cloud. So contribute into the open source communities, be part of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, Linux Foundation. We engage with the community, and particularly in areas that we are good at, security being one of them, networking being another one. So I think those are areas that we always invest back upstream in those communities too. So we're doing a lot of open sourcing of projects, open sourcing our connectors to our operator for Kubernetes on the WebLogic side, the open service broker for OCI. Think about utilizing connections and leveraging connections that people use. So I think it's a core part of what we do. We have an open source, office of the open source. We're actually promoting all these things internally, and I've seen a huge amount of progress in terms of breaking down a lot of the legal barriers too. Just trying to be more open in how we open source projects and how we work with the open source community than we were even 5 to 10 years ago. So it's kind of part of the movement to the cloud, as part of the broader developer movement, and all the services around things we're offering for our free tier. You have to also then give back as part of that. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch. If you're not doing one, you can't do the other. So they work hand in hand.
Got it. Well, thank you. This has been a great episode. Great to chat with you about the things that I imagine you were under embargo for when we chatted last year.
Yeah, good stuff. And hope to talk more in 2020.
Sounds good. Well, let's move on to picks. I have two. The first one is, so I guess a bit of personal news for me. This is public now. I finished up 5 wonderful years at Chef at the end of last year, and I am starting at Mozilla in about a month, which means I have about a month off, and I can finally do all these long-term projects that I've been wanting to do for some time, but just haven't had the time to do it. So something I thought was going to be a long-term project, but it turns out it's actually not, is making my own pickles. For some reason, I thought there was way more involved in making pickled onions, pickled carrots, et cetera, than there actually is. No, it's dead simple. It's just basically taking some vinegar, some salt, a little bit of sweetener, putting the veggies in a jar and pouring the stuff over it and letting it sit for a while. So I've been making quite a few of those. I highly recommend it as a project. It's very little active work involved in it. My second pick is a show, I think it's season 4 of The Expanse just came out on Amazon Prime, and it's fantastic. It is one of my very favorite current shows. I think one of my favorite sci-fi shows ever. The casting is fantastic. I highly recommend it. And Chuck, how about you?
I am dying to watch The Expanse, but I got sucked into one of my picks on Amazon Prime, which is The Man in the High Castle. They released their 4th and final season, or they are about to, I can't remember. But I'm in the middle of season 2, and I kind of want to finish it before I watch The Expanse, but it's killing me not to watch The Expanse. So, the books are terrific too, by the way, if you're looking at The Expanse. I haven't read the Man in the High Castle book or books. I don't know if it's a series or just one book.
It's just one book, I believe.
But yeah, the Expanse books are awesome. And the author, I can't remember his name, James Corey.
James Corey, yes.
James Comey. That's another book.
That's an outtake. I'm going to put that in. Gosh. Okay. Outtake. Go back.
I haven't read his book, so I can't pick it. Anyway,
James Corey.
Yeah, James Corey. So anyway, James Corey, he basically writes a novel and then a novella that goes in the middle that kind of sets up the next book. And I'll also put in that on the TV series, the actors don't grow old, I guess, as quickly as the characters in the book, because he skips numerous years between the books. And so, they kind of had to adapt that a little bit. But I honestly can't tell you which I like more, the books or the TV series, which is really telling for me because I almost always like the books better. So, yeah, that said, really, really enjoyed that. So I'm going to pick that. I've also been listening to some books. These were picked on Views on View. And I was like, oh, yeah, I read those in junior high. And I don't remember anything about them except that I liked them. So I picked them up on Audible. It's the Rift War Saga by Raymond E. Feist. And the first one's Magician Apprentice. And the second one's Magician Master. I guess originally it was one book called Magician. And the publishing company said it was way too long, made him take stuff out. And then he came back and he split it up and put the parts back in that he wanted in the 90s, which is probably when I read it anyway. But anyway, I'm really, really enjoying them. So I'm going to pick those. And then as far as like business books and stuff go, I recently finished a book called Ready, Fire, Aim. And he talks through kind of the different stages that businesses go through and the things that you should be doing when you're in those stages. And so it's funny because, devchat.tv, we've never done $1 million in sales. And so, yeah, it kind of just drove home. Yeah, you need to spend a little more time doing sales. Interestingly enough, I have been working on, before I read the book, what he talks about for stage 2, which is getting your processes in place. And so we're doing that too. But anyway, really, really interesting and terrific book as far as just general business advice if you're looking for that. So, yeah, I'll pick all of those.
All right. And over to you, Bob. What are your picks this week?
Well, I'm feeling kind of sad. I wrapped up Mr. Robot and Silicon Valley, and I was kind of sad to see those go. But so I'm shopping for new shows. So I'm thank you for your inputs. I'll have to go out and try to start watching some new ones I can fall in love with. I'm committing to try to watch all the Oscar nominees before the Oscars come out.
For all the categories?
Well, as much as possible in terms of
Gotcha.
the actors and actresses and directors and things like that. And I'm a 49er fan, so I'm cheering for them for the football season and hoping they kind of continue on till at least the Super Bowl. We'll see. So that's what I'm looking forward to. But yeah, that's my 2020 so far.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, again, thank you for coming on our show. Thank you all our listeners for listening. And welcome to 2020, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you again soon.
See ya. Max out.
Thanks.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.